Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples, the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with the master of game grades, McCurdy. Hey, Bruce, how you doing?
Hey David, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty pumped. I am
hmm
pretty pumped. I think the whole thing of the Oilers crashing in the playoffs the last 2 years was kind of weighing on me through the first round, and I had a sense of doom, a
hmm
little bit of a sense of doom, impending doom the whole time, even though I thought the Oilers were the better team. I thought they
They
should be
were.
able to handle the Kings.
hmm
Um, Yet the Kings took them to 7 games, and there was reasons for that. There was inconsistent play from the Oilers. There were some injuries, and it was a hard series in a lot of ways. But they found their way through it, and I think I think they may have found something that can get them through a much tougher series coming up against the Calgary Flames, the Battle of Alberta. So, how are you doing?
Oh, good. I'm still enjoying. I mean, we had 5 Game 7 on the weekend,
Yeah,
and four of them were one-goal games, and only one was the blowout, by the Oilers 2-0 over the Kings,
yeah.
and two of them went to overtime. Two of them went right down to the death, as they say in the soccer uh, community. But um, for a while there, it looked as if Dallas might actually sneak by Calgary, and that would very much obviously change the equation of what happens next with home ice advantage and so on. But finally, uh, Johnny B. Goodrow found a tiny hole in the massive armor of Steve Ottinger, and so Calgary is through, having survived a scare of their own in the first round. So both teams were heavier favorites, and they wound up winning by in the first round. But in the end, the two best teams in the Pacific are through.
There you go. Yeah, that was I was saying I was just turning into the Flames game. I was busy last night,
hmm
and then I turned it on and they scored, and I had been hoping for Dallas, I guess, hoping to see that because I think Dallas would have been an easier opponent. But I'm pretty I'm pretty excited about this. This couldn't be better. We've needed this for a long time, and we're finally getting it. Like it's truly thrilling playoff series, the one the series that we looked forward to more than any in the 1980s, and it's back. So I'm really happy the Oilers are going to be doing this. Bruce, we're going to look back a little bit at the last series, but through a frame of looking forward at this coming one. So it's looking back at what happened against the Kings and during the regular season, and thinking about what are a couple of reasons that maybe give you optimism that the Oilers, what you've seen, are going to beat the Flames, and what's one thing that's kind of nagging at you, um, that you think might be a reason the Flames will beat the Oilers. So why don't you start it off? What's your first reason for optimism heading into this series based on what you just saw and have seen?
Yeah, simply put, we got Connor McDavid, and they don't. And I shouldn't say we, because we're all supposed to be impartial here, even as fan
No,
bloggers. But
well, maybe.
as a
I don't
fan
know.
blogger and living in Edmonton, I'll say the Oilers have Connor McDavid, and the Flames do not. So there's plenty of reason for to create optimism. We've seen in recent days McDavid take over and dominate 3 consecutive hockey games, as even the 5-4 loss in Game 5, where the Oilers put up a spirited 3-goal comeback in the third period, and they just couldn't handle um, McDavid. The Kings couldn't, and I'm not sure who could. I mean, Calgary does have a good, disciplined defensive team. They're obviously, I think, obviously going to try and put a physical pounding on them. But that said, their big physical defense pair is their third pair, and they won't want too much of that matchup, I wouldn't imagine, against Edmonton's top line. But McDavid's, I mean, he scored 14 points in the first round of the playoffs. He was plus 10, I believe, and there was only one empty net goal, I think, on each team's side. So that was legit at even strength. 5-on-5, he was 11-4 against, and I mean, he just was in the high 60s or even 70s percent, and most of the advanced stat metrics, 70.6% expected goal share. I mean, that's just off the charts fantastic. And he himself was off the charts fantastic in the last, well, throughout the series, but I think just getting more and more fearsome and committed to the cause. And I made, like over the years, like people sort of compared him to the great Oiler dynasties, that he's sort of the Gretzky of this dynasty. But over the weekend, I heard a few Mark Messier references to Connor McDavid, and this is a good thing because
Yeah.
McDavid, or what Messier brought to that team, was the fearsome willpower, and we saw, I think, a startling display of that in these most recent games, and I think he's dialing it up to the point where what it's going to take is me at the very, bringing all that I can bring, and we're just seeing him winning all kinds of puck battles, spinning off a defenseman, doing these moves that just shaking guys with these rapid spin moves, and they against would-be checkers, and leaving them in his wake and driving the puck to the net, and finding ways to create chaos and goals.
You know, if I'm completely honest, Bruce, about Connor McDavid, I'm going to say he not only came up short in previous playoffs years, he came up significantly short of what he's capable of. And I don't know why that was necessarily, because in the regular season, he was a much better player, like a much, he was the dominant NHL player in each of those seasons, just like he was this year, and should be winning the MVP award. If people didn't have their agendas, he would be the MVP again this year. And I'm sure the players will give him their award for being the best player.
I'm not, but we'll see.
I bet you they will.
I hope so.
I hope so too. I expect they will. Anyway, he did come up short in the playoffs, and most of all in 2017, I think, where a number of players were on the Oilers, Draisaitl and Klefbom in particular, were better players for the Oilers than McDavid was that year. But also in the last 2 years, and I did come down, I think, to psychological factors, both his understanding of the game, the need to be as conscientious, intense and conscientious on defense as he was dynamic and intent on the attack. They now match up. He is a completely integrated player where both sides of his game are played with the same amount of intensity and ferocity and attention to detail. It is a tremendous improvement in his play, Bruce. The level of play that we just saw from Connor McDavid in that series was off the charts, and it's off our own charts. We look at grade A scoring chances. Connor McDavid this year in the regular season had his best year in terms of grade A, his contributions to grade A chances for and against. His plus minus was 2.3 grade A contributions on grade A shots per 15 minutes, essentially per game. So he started at about, as a younger player, he was about +1, +1.2. He gradually rose 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, and this year in the regular season, 2.3 plus 2.3 per game on grade A shots. So there's been this growth in his game that we've seen with our own eyes from video analysis. This year in the 7 playoff games against the Kings, he was plus 3.7.
Oh.
He almost doubled his regular season output, Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's awesome what he did in that series. It truly was. He went Connor McDavid supernova. Like he just exploded in a way that he hasn't, and it was at both ends of the ice. And we've always, in some ways the question was before, like, is he going to be this vastly improved version of Taylor Hall on the Oilers? Taylor Hall was this incredible dynamic offensive hockey player who was iffy on defense. So, McDavid came in and he was clearly going to be a lot better than Taylor Hall, but how, what was going to be the trajectory? Well, now I think the question is he going to be, he's starting to play like Sidney Crosby has played in the playoffs, learned to play in the playoffs. And is he going to be an improved version of that player I think is the question. Now that should be his question. That should be his ambition. And to do that, he's got to keep winning in the playoffs. And my prediction for this playoffs is he's going to he is going to lift the Oilers above the Calgary Flames. I think the Oilers are going to win this series, and I think it's going to be because of Connor McDavid, and what he brings to the team right now. What we just saw was spectacular and entirely encouraging. Like, couldn't be more encouraging. If the only thing that could be better is if everyone was healthy, but as long as he stays healthy, as long as he's there, and some of the the lots of other key players, because there's lots of key players on the Oilers now. If he's healthy, the Oilers will win. That's my thought on this series.
What do you got for optimism besides that?
My other thing, I was just listening to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick's their podcast about the Leafs and about what the Leafs need, and it was really interesting because they were going, they just need this massive, hideous jerk on their top lines, this nasty, awful player that everybody hates to play against, who's got some skill, who actually can hang in there and play hockey. And I thought, well, I know one team that's going to be bidding for Evander Kane this summer. So this is what the Oilers needed, Bruce. Once they got rid of Maroon, who was actually doing that role pretty well on the Oilers, and they decided, the whole signing Milan Lucic thing, and they chose Lucic over Maroon, essentially. A huge mistake. Since they lost that guy, Patrick Maroon, they didn't have anyone who could fulfill that role. But when they brought in Evander Kane, they had that guy. And the way I look at it, he brings, it's the first time the Oilers have had that kind of swagger in a player, that kind of ultimate alpha male confidence that you see from Kane. Love him or hate him, and lots of people hate him. Exactly. He is the unplugged alpha, and he goes for it on the ice. He's a nasty customer, but I think every player who's on the ice with him feels, 2 inches taller and 20 pounds of muscle heavier. They all start going for it, and this team they're feeding off Connor McDavid and Evander Kane, and some other players too who are leaders on this team. I think Mike Smith and a few others, but it's McDavid and Kane who are setting the tone. He's the power forward this team needed for forever, and they've got him. And Matt Tkachuk we hate him because he is that player too. He's going to cause all kinds of trouble for the Oilers this series. But the Oilers finally have an answer, I think, in Evander Kane.
That's a fair way to put it.
Kane is going to cause all kinds of trouble. The Flames fans are going to hate his guts by the end of this series, Bruce. And I just hope that the hate is like a mountain of hate for Evander Kane, because that will be a good thing for the Edmonton Oilers. And that's what I expect to happen. And that's what we saw with LA. He was giving face washes, elbows, dirty plays, going to the net, playing hard, scoring goals. Everything a power forward should be, he was. And that's my I share in your reason for optimism with McDavid, but that's my first pick for the other reason.
Yeah, well, you talk about power forwards, and one thing I look for in power forwards is crooked numbers across the statistical spectrum. And I mean, in the playoffs, Kane, 7 goals in 7 games, 2 assists, 9 points, +5. But he also had 16 penalty minutes and 32 hits. And he was just involved in the physical side and the down and dirty, the scrummage, and also effective, around their net, obviously, with all those goals. And I thought he had I also believe he led the league or the team in shots. I haven't got it in front of me, 34 shots. And so he was really bringing it throughout round 1, and I see no reason that's going to change. If you broke down Evander Kane's half season into 2 quarter seasons, I think you'd see he came on pretty strong down the stretch after sort of feeling his way into it for a little while, after having not played a lot of hockey for a long time. And so he's become a factor, and that has changed the look of the Oilers.
He had you were correct, Bruce, including with the
Hmm.
number
Hmm.
34. McDavid next best 27,
Wow.
Hyman
Shot a game more.
26. Yeah, Hyman 26, Nugent Hopkins 19, and Draisaitl just 17, which speaks to his state of health, which we're going to be
Hmm.
getting to. You know, if the Oilers were relying, if we were heading into this series we're relying for our toughness on Zach Cassian, you know, I would be worried, and I think it would be not cause to worry because Zach Cassian he can't really play on a top line. He doesn't have the
Right.
skill to hang in there. That's I just want to just a brief aside on Zach Cassian. There was a lot of skepticism, like the last couple of years, like, oh well, Zach Cassian just needs to play with fans in the building and cheering him on, and he'll be good again. And a lot of people laughed at that. I probably did at one point too. Thought that was a really stupid idea. And because sometimes there often were full houses, but I have to say, Bruce, that was the best hockey Zach Cassian has played in since the Anaheim series was against the LA Kings. He really did come alive in these playoffs so far. He was a good hockey player, and he played physical hockey. So maybe there was something to that we sneered at that we should retract. Um, what is your
Well, he
next?
was a lot
Go ahead.
bigger factor in that series than Warren Fogle was, now wasn't he?
He
And
certainly was, and that was
you
my
know,
prediction that
I
Fogel
was
would come
looking
up.
today at the Oilers contract situation, and a lot of people have been looking at that casting contract, myself included. 2 more years, 3.2 million, and you ask me today, and I'll still say that's a heavy load to carry for what they get. But they have not much difference in Warren Fogle, and he had essentially played his way out of the lineup. So
Yeah,
I guess that's a cause for negativism. But I mean, you have, I guess, some redundancy there. And in the playoff series, Kassian was, I thought, pretty solid. Not perfect, and he's never going to be, but more positive contributions than the other way.
if he was the Oilers' sole tough, like the main tough guy, the worry would be like they'll get under his skin, they'll make him do something like Kachuk has gotten under his skin,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
you wouldn't want that. But
Hmm.
Kane he's a different breed of cat,
Hmm.
and I'm looking forward to this. Bruce, what is your second cause for optimism?
Yeah, it's the improvement of the Oilers under Jay Woodcroft, and it's the Jay Woodcroft factor going into the series. And saying that, I'll acknowledge that Calgary also has an outstanding and obviously way more proven Stanley Cup winning coach in Daryl Sutter. So it's not like Oilers have a huge edge behind the bench, but I just think they're a way better coach team, and they're going to be better prepared. They're going to have better response to stuff that goes sideways on them, as we just saw in the LA series, where they got behind the eight ball, and Woodcroft came up with a wrinkle on his 11 forward strategy that I thought was nothing short of brilliant. That basically he had a second line with no center. He had a first line of McDavid with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, and a second line that was Hyman on one wing and Kane on the other wing, and no real center. And then the third and fourth lines were intact lines. So he had like a top five and a bottom six. And then he rotated through the centers, the three main centers, uh, especially McDavid, but also Nugent Hopkins and McLeod, uh, took their turns between uh, Hyman and Kane, and however they lined up, they had an effective line. Whereas previous versions of that strategy, it had sort of a fourth line with two extra forwards, Cassian and Broussard or Shore, uh, and McDavid or someone could go down there and make them a little livelier, but he wasn't going to turn them into a scoring line. Whereas Kane and Hyman, they're a scoring line almost no matter who was the center. And so I just thought it was such a cool wrinkle, and it worked tremendously to Oilers' advantage in those last two games. Now it may be a wrinkle that doesn't work in the next series, and they'll have to come up with something different. But what I have confidence in is that Jay Woodcroft and staff will find something different to respond. Like last year, the when the Oilers got behind in Game 1, Dave Tippett's response was, well, let's put Draisaitl together with McDavid, and then he just left them together for the whole rest of the series. It didn't seem like there was any more wrinkles at his disposal. And with Jay Woodcroft, I don't have that concern. And just to bring to the fore, since he was hired on February 10th, here are the top teams in the National Hockey League of the 32 teams by points. Number one, Calgary Flames, 26, 8, and 5 for 57 points. Number two, Edmonton Oilers, 26, 9, and 3 for 55 points. And only Florida Panthers, who, all they did was win the President's Trophy. They had a slightly better points percentage because they didn't play quite as many games in that stretch as the Oilers and Flames and Oilers did. But basically since the All-Star break, these are two of the very top teams in the league. And that gives me optimism that we're going to see a tremendous series.
I think so. We could be let down, of course, but I don't think so. Woodcroft, I mean, to give Dave Tippett a little bit of credit, he didn't have Zach Hyman and Evander Kane on the wings, right?
Last year, he did not.
To shuffle things up. So it really, those moves have been, they were substantial additions. Zach Hyman also played very well, I thought, in that round against Los Angeles, and brings a lot to the team. Bruce, my second reason for optimism is the game that the Oilers found in games. They first got it in game 2, but in games 6 and 7, the defensive game that they found. And I think what they realized is, to the extent that they just rely on talent, and I think that they have so many talented players who have relied on, I'm not saying they're not hardworking. They are incredibly hardworking, and they have worked hard all their lives to score goals. They have worked hard on their stick handling, their shooting, their passing, their skating, all of their offensive skills. They have been fanatically devoted to all of their hockey careers, and it paid off with each of these players being highly sought after throughout their careers. First line attackers, high draft picks. At least first round draft picks, if not at the very top of the first round. So McDavid, first overall, RNH first overall, Draisaitl was that third overall? Kane, he was a high draft pick.
Fourth, I think.
Kassian
was 13th overall in his draft year, or 14th.
Yamamoto, high draft pick. Puljujarvi, overall. So they have all these forwards who work their way up one way, and I think there is a tendency of all of them to rely on that offensive genius, offensive intensity that they have, and it's there. It's great, but I think it's bit them in the butt in the playoffs, because when they've needed to shut down the opposing teams, they haven't been able to. But what they have found under Woodcroft, especially, and they've been working towards this for years now. All of them work hard on their defensive play in the NHL. Like, I'm not saying they haven't, but what it came together finally. It actually came together in the series against Los Angeles in Game 6, when they realized, like, we cannot let these guys score. We've got to shut them down, or we're going to lose this. We could lose this game. We could be out of the playoffs again. And it just hit home in a way. Desperation drives change, and it hit home in a way that made them finally do it. All of them, they all did it. It was incredible to see. And they realized we have more offensive talent than any other team probably in the NHL. And if we decide to outwork them and outthink them on defense as well, just hustle, perspiration, and making the right reads and awareness, we will win. That's the formula for us to win in the NHL. They finally got it. And it was incredible to see. They dominated the Los Angeles Kings in Game 7. 13-5 for grade A shots. They dominated the Kings in Game 6, 17-7 in grade A shots. This was a deserving Oilers team, and it was a formula which I think they now realize they can replicate. It's just up to them. They know how to do it now. They've done it, and they can do this against the Calgary Flames. The Oilers have more offensive firepower than the Calgary Flames. as good as Calgary is, and Calgary's these are very close teams. Like there's not much to separate them, even on the attack where you have players like Lindholm and Gaudreau and Kachuk who are fantastic offensive attackers. But the Oilers have better attackers, and if they can, I think they can match the Flames' defensive intensity. This is what the Flames had over the Oilers
Right.
this year, and the Oilers have finally got it. They've got the formula. They've got the right idea. So this is my second reason for optimism.
All right. Well, certainly if they bring the games that they brought in games 6 and 7, they're going to be a very tough out for anybody. And the Flames will have to bring their A game, which is considerable, and they're a really good team. And of course, they have what many people deem to be an advantage in net. Although the numbers say that Mike Smith has been just fine, better than just fine, since finally finding his reasonable health in the late part of the season. But he was good in the first round. I mean, LA had 24 expected goals in that series, and they actually scored 17. So that's net minding. That's that kind of difference. So we'll see if he can carry it on against his old team and a big head-to-head matchup against Jacob Markstrom at the other end.
Yeah, I was almost like we're moving on now to our what reasons for pessimism, and I was in my mind it's the goaltending, right? Like in my head, but I don't know if that's fair to Mike Smith. He's in April, once he got healthy, once he was healthy, he was great, and when he got he down the stretch fantastic, and in the playoffs he was at least good, and he was super solid in these last few games. I mean, he did give away with the puck handling the first game.
Yeah, and he bounced back from that. To his full credit, that was a pretty devastating mistake that would have punctured some people, and he bounced back with some pretty good net minding.
Yeah. So, what were the expected goals, Bruce?
It's like 23.8 or something on Natural Stat Trick.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at
they got 17, including an empty netter.
When you look at the way we measure it, like with our own eyeballing and pro stats to come up with grade A shots and 5 alarm shots, we expected, based on our calculations, that he would give up 23 goals.
Oh, there you go.
So exactly the same. It worked out too this time. All right. So what is your cause for pessimism, Bruce? What are you thinking?
It's general state of health of some important players, and two sort of very frontline players in Leon Draisaitl and Darnell Nurse. And I would argue Jesse Puljujärvi has not been 100% for a while, and he was a first-line player who's gradually fallen down the lineup in part for I think physical reasons. But concentrating first on Leon Draisaitl, who's such a hugely significant, he's been, if not McDavid's equal for long chunks of time over these last several seasons. He's been a fabulous first lieutenant and a guy capable of, winning games for the team and, being a game breaker. And an all-rounder who does so many different things for him. He can play wing or center. He's awesome on the power play. Set a team record for power play goals. He's their defensive face-off zone expert, and he's their 3-on-5 penalty killing expert. This is a guy who does a lot of different things. But he was already hurt, and he banged himself up late in the season, taking a run at Trevor Zegras in a game in Anaheim. And then in the playoffs, I mean, he was targeted by LA, and he wound up suffering what they're calling now a high ankle sprain when he was mugged from behind and wrenched down to the ice by Mikey Anderson. in a secondary scrum that somehow avoided any attention or supervision from the league's officials or player safety department, but which I saw as a significantly kind of dirty play that compromised the Oilers' chances then and there, but still going forward. High ankle sprains. I mean, the way Leon was skating, when he puts on his full head of steam, he's pretty hard to stop. And in Game 7, I never saw that head of steam at any point. I mean, he got through it. He somehow played 22 and a half minutes, but we did not see the kind of power skating that is a really big part of his game. And I don't know what percent he is. All I know it's something significantly below 100. And what I also know is that the Calgary Flames will take won't say, oh well, this guy's banged up a little bit. We better stand off and give him a little space. I expect, frankly, quite the reverse. So
yeah, lots of hacks
yeah.
on the wounded knee, or the wounded ankle, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Bury our hearts at wounded ankle.
So, and then just to add to that, Darnell Nurse, who got hurt in the playoff clinching win against Colorado, missed the last games of the regular season, came back for the playoffs. And I would say fairly obviously by eye, he too is something under 100%. He's got a wonky wheel, and he rather than get stronger as the series went along, I thought he was actually starting to flag a little bit. At the end of Game 5, I thought he looked pretty whipped, and of course that was a game that he took a suspension, possibly born out of frustration. And he bounced back. I mean, he had a pretty good Game 7, and he had good stats in the series, but I don't think we have the Darnell Nurse that I would have expected in the playoffs. I'm more of a take charge physical guy, and I think he's a little bit more and it's not all bad, stay at home and take care of business and survive. But I just think he's down a court as well, and those are, I mean, that's the core leadership group of the Oilers. I think everyone would identify the same three players, and two of them are banged up.
Yeah, frustrating, Bruce? Real
Mm-hmm.
frustrating.
Yeah, especially on a after the whistle scrum. That one really pisses me off, to be honest.
Just looking up Darnell Nurse's. Yeah, well, he was in the regular season. He had 6.6 hits per 60,
Mm-hmm.
and he was down one hit a game, 5.6. Now, normally, I think you'd expect a player to be up in terms of his hit
Right.
ratio of
Yeah.
hits in the playoffs, and he was down one hit. That's what I noticed.
Well, the team was way up. They were up to 40 per game, and I don't think they had 39 was their top in the whole season in one game. And
Nurse,
they were over
yeah,
40 consistently in the King series. But it wasn't Nurse that was doing that. It was forwards.
and I don't remember a hard hit from Darnell Nurse. Like you'd expect him to have some just really hard
Yeah.
hits, and we didn't see that. I think he's lacking some explosiveness, some agility in his
Yeah.
with his legs too, is his leg
Mm-hmm.
injury. So, there's times past with Darnell Nurse. Hopefully he is mending, and we don't know with Draisaitl the extent of that injury. Hopefully he'll be mending too. Like these are really unknowns for us. Like maybe they will, sometimes you sprain your ankle and you're good 2 days later. And then other
Yeah.
times it's like 2 months later and you're still limping. So who knows what's
Yeah.
the situation is with either of these players. We just don't know. But Bruce, what concerned me with Draisaitl is like they count on him on the power play to unleash the executioner shot, lashing that
Mm-hmm.
stick in the net and driving that puck home. It's the best option for scoring. If that's gone, that's that's a big loss for the Edmonton Oilers, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really worried that that's not going to be there. That he won't have that kind of leverage on his shot. But it's compounded by the fact if he's in the lineup and he's still there and he's in that spot, but he can't make that play,
Right.
it's an opportunity cost. Like you got to play
Mm-hmm.
him, but he can't.
Yeah.
Someone
Mm-hmm.
else actually might do better, but he's Leon Draisaitl. You're going to have him out there, and
Who?
Jay Woodcroft is going to have him out there.
Yeah.
And
Who would do better though? I mean,
well, who would do better? Like if he's injured, you mean? Like
yeah. Well, even then.
Well, that's it. Like someone might not do better. Like actually had a pretty good game 7. Like
Yep.
he made the play on, like
Yep.
he still makes plays.
Hmm.
But so that's a fair question. Well, Evander Kane might, like you don't know, right? Because Kane's not on
Right.
the top power play.
Hmm.
We don't, that's just one guy that you could have out there, but that won't happen if he's in the lineup. So it's like with Nurse, right? The game that he missed in game 6, was he really missed? I mean, Kulak stepped up and played as well as Darnell Nurse did the whole series. Chris Russell was fine. I mean, when players are playing hurt, there's this kind of weird calculation, like, are you really helping the team or not? And that's one of the things I'm worried about with both these players in this series. And I know it's a harsh thing to say and unwelcome. People won't like to hear that, but that is my one of my concerns. Um, that said, Draisaitl was pretty good in Game 7, playing on one ankle, one and a half ankles, and I think he'll. I expect. I just hope this is one of these ankle injuries that, quick healing rather than long healing. And Leon strikes me, he's as sturdy as they come for an NHL hockey player. And if anyone's going to bounce back fast, I'm betting on Leon Draisaitl. He's got that kind of musculature frame where I just think he can take a lot and he can bounce back fast. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was asked by reporters in a fairly wordy question after Game 7 about the status of his injury, and he just said, "I'm fine." Deadpan, and then a little smile afterwards, like that's all you're getting out of me. But it's pretty clear that he's not fully fine. But he was fine enough to play and play 22 minutes, and got a point and a +2 in a 2-0 game. Like he helped the cause. There's no question about that, and he will continue to do that, but maybe not to the full peak that we would expect and hope for.
Here's one for you, Bruce. In terms of hits per 60 in the playoffs,
Hmm.
Evan Bouchard had a higher rate of hits per 60 than Darnell Nurse. In fact,
Than anybody on the Oilers, I think, at
Evan
D-man.
Bouchard had the highest hits per 60 of any Oilers defenseman, and it wasn't that high. So this is my
Hmm.
concern. This
Okay.
is this is going to be my cause for some pessimism. Is this group of Oilers defensemen is really high skill. Like that old concern that existed, like this team can't move the puck well enough to win in the playoffs. It's gone. Like these guys can move the puck. There's some really good puck movers, and starting with Evan Bouchard, Duncan Keith, Tyson Barrie. Cece's pretty good with the puck. Nurse is a puck mover. So that's not the issue. But I do have a little bit. The Flames they're a big, tough, physical hockey team. And I worry whether the Oilers defensemen might get overwhelmed at times by the Flames' physicality. And, they're going to have to figure out a way to not have that happen, to move the puck fast enough, smartly enough, and also to get ready and to take on that physical challenge, like Evan Bouchard seemed to be doing right in the first round. Like CC, Kulak, Barrie, like these are veteran hockey players. They should be able to handle this kind of physical pressure. Duncan Keith, this is why they brought in Duncan Keith, who had, by the way, pretty strong, who had a very good game 7 and was pretty good in game 6 as well, after having a couple really terrible games.
Hmm.
So they showed against LA, which has also had some big tough forwards and can play hard. But I think the Flames are going to be that much tougher and that much harder and faster on these defensemen than the LA Kings were. And I'm just wondering how is this going to go? How's this going to work? Can they match up? Can they match that hitting?
Yeah. Well, Calgary will be trying to play a physical game against the Oilers forwards for sure, and I think we'll see that Zadorov and Goodbranson. I mean, that's a pretty fearsome pairing, and hopefully the Oilers can beat them with speed. But they held their own, but they were very carefully managed by Calgary. That they didn't play a whole lot of the tough minutes. So we'll see how much we actually see McDavid against those guys, for instance. But Calgary's got a pretty strong sort of well-defined hierarchy on their defense. And of course, they have a big question of injury now with Chris Tanev, who went down in Game 6, left the ice, never played Game 7, and I think they're being pretty tight-lipped about his availability going forward. Now, having a couple days off, because this series doesn't start now until Wednesday, will help all these guys a little bit. I mean, this is normally the Oilers would be playing today, Monday. They've been playing every other day till now, and they just get today off, and then they just go pick it up again on Wednesday, and they'll go every other day again. So this little break will probably be to the benefit of both. But Edmonton will have one more day rest than does Calgary entering the series.
Yeah, it's a good point you're making about Goodbranson and Zadorov. The Flames' physicality is mainly those two players. Like they're the two most fearsome hitters on that team, right? And they're both on defense.
Yep,
So,
same pairing, yeah.
the forwards in terms of who hits their top hitting was Brett Ritchie, who only played 4 of the 7 games because they don't love him too much. He was their top hitting guy in terms of hits per 60, and then Milan Lucic, who seems rejuvenated in Calgary, and Trevor Lewis was next, Dylan Dubé, Blake Coleman. So it's not like, I mean, this isn't the 1970s Philadelphia Flyers coming in to crunch you. Like this isn't that. They're a physical team, but it's not the main element of their forwards game. So, but there is some big guys there, and they can do some damage. I saw, it was interesting. I saw Lucic on TV after the game, and I thought, I don't know if this is true. I'm just eyeballing him. Bruce, he looks way lighter than he was when he was in Edmonton, and I don't know if he has lost a lot of weight. He looked to me like he's lost a lot of weight in terms, and I think maybe that's really helped his game. I haven't watched.
Not the worst idea for sure.
Yeah, to survive in this NHL, he wasn't quick enough in Edmonton. And he seems to be rediscovered his hockey game in Calgary. Good for him. Like I don't have any hard feelings against Milan Lucic. He's a hell of a hockey player in his day, and it looks like he's rediscovered that to some extent in Calgary. So
sure made a nice backhand pass right across the slot for a one-timer that was very dangerous last night. I believe in even in overtime that occurred. I just saw the 30-minute game of the version of the game because I was off chasing the lunar eclipse last night, but that play caught my eye of, pretty darn good pass from a supposed, fourth line plumber. That's, got a history of scoring in the past, and don't take them lightly. Let's put it that way. You try and beat them, and you hope that you can get the better of them, but it won't be easy.
Well, Bruce, let's leave it there, and go Oilers.
Go Oilers. It's Wednesday night, and anticipation for sure after 5 battles of Alberta between 1983 and 91 playoff versions. It's been a 3-decade wait for the next one, and it's high time. Let's go.
Bruce, thanks for talking today.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. I got to figure out how to do the stop recording here.